Hi folks, welcome to IMB Magazine. My name is Clive Forth from MTB Skills and you're joining us for the Skills and Technique feature. Each issue we're going to be looking at different techniques and the core skills to riding mountain bikes. So sit back and relax and enjoy.
Hi folks, welcome back. So here we are for another edition of the IMB Technique feature, and it's the biggie. It's the one that a lot of people want to master. We're looking at jumps. Right, so let's get stuck into this then, jumping. Hopefully you've been following the features and you've already learnt how to get your bunny hops down. Certain jump features require pretty much the same shape as a bunny hop, but it's very hard to, I mean, we could talk about this for hours and hours and hours because it's such a broad topic. There are so many different jump shapes, jump styles. The way that you tackle them is really going to be dependent upon what's on the entrance to the jump and what's beyond the jump itself, as well as the big obvious one is the speed that you're carrying. So here on a good day when you've got a tailwind, the giveaways, these big wind turbines in the background, you can over jump quite a lot of this stuff very easy. So you're having to really scrub your speed off and press and squash the jumps down. But it's all about reading the takeoff. So we're going to start with the most common shape of all, which is a tabletop jump. And what we've got here on the entrance to that is you've got the transition, the radius that leads you up onto the jump face itself, and then somewhere near the top, where it's very obvious and square and punchy, or whether it's worn and rounded off, you've got the jump lip itself, and that's kind of your exit point. That's jump face should set your trajectory, as well as obviously the angle and the sort of attack that you've put on the bike, the way that you're shaping the bike up. But that will set your trajectory, and if they're built well, then it's a nice smooth line over the top as if it was a full mound of dirt rather than having the top spliced off to meet up with the landing. So this particular tabletop is not very high at all. It's got a very mellow transition. The radius that leads into that jump face is pretty small, and what you're seeing in this particular jump is something that happens with all trails. The material's been aerated, it's gone through consolidation and compaction, the air's come out of it, the water's come out of it, and then the trail surface itself, what we call the tread on the trail, the bit that you're riding on, starts to dish out. And that means that the shape of the face and the transition itself change over time. So you can ride the edges of that, you can get off of the main line and ride the original built feature, or you can ride there in the groove. This is a lot of what we call as-dug material, it's straight out the floor, so it's quite rocky, and you have to be careful that there's no shapes in there that are going to give you a false kick, moving the bike sideways in the air, or giving you a little bit of a false kick and a punch and trying to sort of kick the back end up as you launch out of that. So all of that information we're reading on the run up to the jump. The more visibility in, the better. And you know, you're looking ahead, as always, looking at the jump face. And even before you get to it, you're looking over the other side of it to see what the trail does. Into the landing zone on this one, and obviously as we can see further up ahead the trail, we've got a series of corners to deal with. So that's going to help us manage our speed on the way in. We need enough speed that we clear the distance, obviously. It's no really good landing on the top and then bouncing up into thin air as the trail's fading away from you. But in a bit more detail, we'll give you a cutaway of that. You can see a few boulders starting to poke up out of the surface here, and you want to be mindful that you're not snagging the edges of those on your landing. There's not really any what I would consider large features here in A Forest. Most of the stuff is relatively small in its scale, and the thing with most small features is it really does invite you in to have a go at it. And if you've not fully honed your technique and you're not comfortable with the different shapes and the way they move the bike below you, then it's quite easy to get and come unstuck. And there's a bit of a telltale in our environment here. We've got these wind turbines, so evidently this can be quite a windy corridor as well. Side winds can wreak havoc with your trajectory, and tailwinds especially can wreak havoc with speed control. Something we want to look at on this little double is partly on its setup. So here we've got a puddle forming on the entrance to this feature, as we have with most of these features, and that typically has arisen because people have panicked, grabbed the brakes hard, and the trail's getting eroded out. Now, it's really good if you can avoid those, because that little patter and bump before the takeoff, before the transition and the takeoff, can really unsettle the bike. So it doesn't matter if you're on a hardtail bike or a full suspension bike, you'll have a little bounce out of that, the bike will come light, and then it'll want to glance into the face of the jump up here, and then you'll rebound up and out. So you can easily visualize these shapes. So by just gracing, you know, getting just off the edge of the trail there next to that puddle, it's obviously clean in there. I've had a good visual on that and made sure there's no rocks or roots or anything poking out the way. So if you can, getting out and around that patter means the bike flows up through the transition onto the jump face, much sweeter, giving me a clean exit. Visibility is great. We can see for miles through here. And from way back up the trail there on my previous feature, I could see that this turns right. So any speed control is done well in advance of the feature. I don't want to be doing everything immediately on top of the feature. It's going to unsettle me, it's going to unsettle the bike. So it's all done well in advance back there if I need to scrub any speed. And small features like this, you'll notice I'm standing tall and proud on the way in, and it's more about having the limb length to be able to soak the feature up. As the bike gets kicked out of there, I want to be able to bring the legs up into the body and absorb that hit. And with the legs up in the body, I can drive them back down again to get the bike down on the landing there. Don't be shy of coming across jump faces as well, even though there's this worn, obvious line up there, which typically sits square to the lip of the jump up here. Don't be shy sometimes of mixing it up and having to turn across the faces of jumps. Particularly with this one here, as we go into this right-hander on the other side, it's good that I start to put a little bit of turn in. The back's going to want to move outwards, and that's going to start to point me in the right direction and get me set up for that corner. Great stuff. So we've progressed down our trail, and after our double, which is just basically a tabletop with the middle scooped out, we've hit on the next sequence of tabletops. So speed's gathering at this point in this trail, and it's really key to maintain a steady pace through these. Obviously you need enough speed to clear them, but the nature of these transitions is quite tight. The bike really wants to get sucked in there, and particularly on this one where he's got a lump of something poking out the top, wants to give that back wheel a little bit of a donk. It's very easy for all that compression force to get released and for the back end of the bike to get spat up. It sort of goes without saying that we need to move our body in time with the trail, and one of the worst things we can do is be stiff in the legs. On this sort of stuff where you're anticipating it's going to kick and spit you up, we're going from tall in the legs and proud on the way up, driving the bike up the jump face and ready to bring the legs up into the body to let the back wheel come up in the air and to level the bike out. This is when we really are making the same sort of shape that we make with the bunny hop. But this time, rather than having to bring the legs up to help the bike come up in the air, we're having to use them to slow the bike from over-accelerating, over-rotating and putting us out the front door. Let's have a look at it from the side. There's an easy way to build into transition jumps, and a sort of simple exercise which you'd have read about in the text which you can do, which is where we're rolling slowly and just try to pull a manual out the top of it and progress that into a little bunny hop. So we'll just run a little session on that. Have a look at these clips. Okay, so as you can see in that clip, we're just rolling up to the lip of the jump, and we're trying to get the trajectory and our takeoff dialed in at this point. So we're tall and proud on the way in, and we're working a similar shape as when we make a manual all the way through the transition and up the jump face. And the idea is matching the shape of that jump face to get the bike to point at the same trajectory. So if you're fired from a cannon, it's pretty easy to clear a tabletop of this size, but you don't need speed. And what we really want to try and teach you is just to take the speed out of it and learn to drive it from the physical movement of your body in time with the bike moving through the trail below you. So bring the speed right down, pull in a manual. From this we can progress to a little bunny hop out of there. And now we're using technique to clear the feature rather than brute force ignorance and speed. Okay, so from our first example where we've just put a manual out the top of it, let's say in that we're going at jogging pace. We've upped the speed a little bit, so a little bit quicker. I'm gonna get my timing right, pull that manual, have a look in the slow-mo, you'll see the shape of the bike is aimed up, maybe a little bit steeper than the jump face, but I get my timing right, and I even use that little rock in there. I get a donk off of that from the back wheel, and I make my bunny hop shape. So that's all about feeding the bike through to level the bike out. So I've taken all the speed out, and already I'm making a nice shape in the air. If I went a little quicker, I'd get a little bit further along the top, a little bit quicker again, and I'm gonna have to use a lot less technique. So as speed increases, sort of our technique and effort decreases, and it's more about just managing the shape of the bike through the air. So it's a really good way to feel your way into these shapes, and go and find different transition shapes and see how they react underneath the bike as you come through them. Okay, so the next jump in the sequence, and it may be that it's the same thing but just stood on its own, needs a little bit more consideration. In this situation, we've not long landed from the last jump, so the bike's still trying to settle down. As you would be on a hardtail, you'd have landed, absorbed that landing. You've got to get back up into neutral stance, ready to roll into this one. But as we can see, the transition's that bit tighter, and that really does push you into the face of the jump. And it's quite a pronounced lip on the top of this jump as well. Very little interference from the rocks coming through, but it's the way that the bike gets sucked in, not very high at all. And if you look at the length of it compared to a bike, I mean, that's on the flat, and then that's through the transition, and the front wheel's nearly already out the top of the jump face, about to hit the lip. So the bike really, and your body, gets pushed into this point and wants to fire out. These are the jump shapes that we have to be a bit more mindful of when they're really tight at the base, because it sucks the bike in and body and wants to kick it back out. But yeah, key thing is to be loose in the limbs, compliant. We're not completely a bag of bones and a skeleton. You know, we've got our muscles and we need to use them to absorb that bike being fired up below us and stop us getting over rotating and going OTB over the bars. So moving on, we've come across to this step up feature. Fortunately, this is on a piece of trail that's currently closed, so we can sit in the middle of it and get to play on it backwards and forwards several times. So step up features, it's more of the same. We've got this run in where we're controlling our speed, leading us through the transition onto the jump face and an exit point. Only difference now is it's completely blind over the top of this, depending on what the run-up's doing, whether you're above ground, below ground, so to speak, as to whether you can or you can't see over the top. So it sort of goes without saying, but I've got to say it, look before you leap. Whatever you're riding, whatever you're jumping, you might have these wooden ladder gaps out in the Alps, over there in Canada, America, wherever you are in the world. So you could have gap jumps that require full commitment. You could have turns on the other side of these things. It could be straight into another feature. So before you hit any feature, make sure you know, first run is a sighting run, not an exciting run. So take a look at it and just get the lie of the land before you come in and hit it. Having ridden this feature many times before, I'm able just to fire in here straight away. They did do a bit of reshaping and change the shape of this thing a little bit. So even I've got to read it as I'm coming in and make some adjustments. But so step ups, it's all about carrying enough pace that you get the height to clear the top. And again, you don't want to be over jumping, you want to be catching the backside, the downslope of the feature. So speed control is a key thing. But to get that flight trajectory, it's exactly the same setup as you'd be doing if you were hitting a tabletop or a double off of the flat. There we go, so if you've seen a few demo runs through, now what's going on compared to some of the still images you might see in the feature, where there's more amplitude and height, is the more I'm riding this feature, the more confident I'm getting with it, the quicker I'm coming into it, the quicker I'm hitting it. Therefore, I'm having to scrub it out. It's wanting to send me sky high. I'm not wanting to go that high, over jump, end up miles there down the landing behind me. I'm wanting to bring the bike in nice and low and get the wheels back on the deck. I need them on the ground for braking, for steering, for all of the above. So you'll see a slight adaptation of technique in there. Go away, watch some of the World Cup footage. Those guys are trying to be quick, point to point, and they really need the wheels on the deck for steering and braking and stuff. And you'll see they scrub things out by turning across the face of the jump and laying the bike flat in the air, pushing it back down to the ground as soon as it can. Cool, so there we go then. We've moved spots, same day, same forest, different spot. Thanks to a good feed down at the A Cafe, down at the A Cafe bike shop there in the village. We've come across to what the locals will know as Shredder. It's part of the Seven Stains Trail Network. And we've gone from this morning stuff where we were on smaller doubles, very mellow, easy stuff if you wanted to roll out of it, and the slightly bigger tabletops. So we're on a slightly bigger double here, and we've come to look at this section in particular because it's quite high speed. They've recently clear felled, so visibility is great, but that can also play with your head because you've got no reference points in terms of managing your speed. And speed on this set of doubles I'm stood on at the minute in particular is really, really key. So the takeoffs, the transition, the jump face are not particularly long, they're not particularly big, so we're expecting a good bit of pop out of these. A little bit of distance, not a great deal, but we've got a very small downslope to match. Now, if we over jump it, big plush bouncy bikes, so long as we're nicely centered on the bike behind the handlebar, we can land that front wheel first, two wheels together, and we've got enough bike and body to absorb the landing. However, it's not good for getting that turn in, getting that traction, braking, etc. We really want to get both wheels down in on the landing. So the difference between doubles and tabletops, well, as I said earlier, and it's quite obvious, is that somebody's removed the middle of it. Now the ones we rode previously, they didn't have too much of a dig out in between them. They were really quite sympathetic. If you came up short, you know, you weren't going to have that big case, you weren't going to get hung up at all. This one that we're looking at now, there's really quite a bit of severity to how much has been taken out of the centre here. So we have quite an upslope over there, and that's something that's really going to hang you up and then want to spit you off the bike should you come up short. You know, you can use all of your limbs and all of your suspension, and it will get you so far to get you out of jail from that case. But there's every potential that it's going to bite from that hit and kick and want to spit you up out the front. Here the trail turns left slightly as well through this feature, so it's quite easy to get run astray and heading off over to the ditch there. So looking at vision where we want to look down the trail, we want to look where we want to go, we're looking for the grip points rather than into the ditch somewhere where we really don't want to go. So we'll just show you this from the side and you can see what we mean about the short takeoff, the severity of the 2 bumps, how much is dug out in the centre and how short that landing is. Okay, so let's have a little sort of look at the psychology of what's happening here in the world of jumping. And really, it's as soon as you move away from riding easy tracks and trails, psychology becomes quite a sizable part of us having confidence within sections of trail, allowing us to commit to sections of trail. And something that is problematic for people when it comes to hitting doubles compared to tabletops is it can be exactly the same size feature. I can fill this in with earth, and there's quite a lot of folk out there that have a go at it. As soon as I scrape that out, and you're now seeing this upslope here, potential hang up and stall point, be it front wheel nasty, back wheel slightly less nasty but still nasty, it starts to play havoc with the mind, as does when you raise a bit of trail in the air and you have a piece of boardwalk. It suddenly throws everybody a bit of a curveball. So you're in the commitment point now where you're stood with a camera looking down into me, ignoring the feature that's before this. If you've cleaned the feature before this, then you're already set up to clear this. But that really back there is your commitment point. And it's at that point you need to make that executive decision. Am I going to go for this feature? Am I not going to go for this feature? And if you're not going to go for it due to the nature of it, how deeply dug out it is, you're really going to have to be scrubbing a lot of speed to get your way through here. But it's all about vision. It's looking up, looking ahead, and getting the measure of it sooner rather than later and not doing anything last minute. If you're a World Cup fan and you've been following that, go back to Fort William, watch Amaury Piron in the winning run. He pedals through the lip of the jump into the finish area at Fort William. It just comes at him by surprise. Apparently he was trying to get a glance at the clock there, and he actually pedals through the lip of the jump, and the bike's so unsettled and his body's so not in the right position, he nearly gets spat over the bar. It's a monumental moment, and that's a classic example where even a professional has just misjudged and mistimed something, and they're trying to do it all on top of the feature, or literally on the feature in his case. So everything needs to be done early, and that commitment point is way back there before this jump. Excellent. Well, thanks for joining us, folks. It's been a pleasure helping you find your flow and get you jumping. And if you like what you've seen and you want to learn some of the other core techniques and some more advanced techniques, which we're going to move into in the coming editions, then tune in to the channel, subscribe, click on the links, do all those usual things that people tell you to do. Have a good one. Take care now.